Hi, everybody. Welcome to Shivers. A lot of people end up asking me, how did I get into horror, especially as someone who's always been afraid of everything? How do I like the movies that I like now? How did I even get to my tastes and know what to discover? So today I'm going to break down my recommendations on where to get started if you are newer to horror, what type of subgenres I would recommend, and some movies that fall under those genres as well. This is going to be a little bit subjective because it's also up to you of what type of subgenres do you like naturally? Are you more of a ghost fan? Are you more of a zombie fan? That might be where you stay. This is all from the perspective of pacing. So, in order of temperature checking genres, subgenres, what I would always recommend starting with is just a very simple story, like a kid's horror movie. When you would move on from there would be monsters, ghosts, hauntings, the thriller and suspense. Thriller and suspense are usually kind of separate. They're in the genre all of their own, but I do think that they're worth mentioning, and I think there's a lot of crossover there too. You also have vampires and werewolves, apocalyptic, zombies, slasher, psychological, possession, torture, dread, and I would end it with body horror. Body horror is not for everybody, even torture is not for everybody, but dread is definitely not for everybody. So we'll get there when we get there. To get started with some of those more teen and kid stories, these are movies that I often go back to now and just kind of see the nostalgia that's there, appreciate them for what they are. So it's not just for kids, but what I would always recommend starting with is Monster House. I love this movie. I think it is a phenomenal story. I think for the time that it came out, it's really beautiful CGI and animation. I think that this is just a true classic movie, classic one that is not only subverting expectations, but also stereotypes as well. It's not just the cranky old man who's your neighbor, but what's going on in their house that might be either a secret or something revealing about that person. So don't judge a book by its cover. After that, I would say The Haunted Mansion. Haunted Mansion is kind of a classic, a staple to more of the Disney crowd, but it does play off of the story from real life Haunted Mansion in Louisiana. That is where the actual Haunted Mansion from the parks, from Disney parks, is modeled off of. And so having more of a true paranormal story behind an actual ride in Disney Park, but also in the movie of the Haunted Mansion, I think is pretty cool. Anything by Tim Burton would be my next recommendation. Tim Burton is just, such a staple. For me, my real interest and real love for horror always started with Tim Burton. I never really considered him scary or horror. It was just sort of this like filmmaker and storyteller who loved Halloween. And even though I was afraid of everything, I still loved Halloween. So being able to have stories that reflected Halloween and that showed a lot of what I already had interest in was a very easy way to just kind of like get my foot in the door. So Nightmare Before Christmas is a really easy one to start with, a good one to start with. Frankenweenie is good for, I would consider, more of a younger crowd. Like Nightmare Before Christmas is still maybe like 10 years and older. Corpse Bride, same sort of thing. Like there are some more mature storytelling content in there, but it's not going to be anything that you can't show your kids. Like they're made for kids to watch, for kids to be introduced to horror. After that, I would say Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I was not a kid when this came out, but I was a kid when these books came out, and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a giant staple of why I am the way I am today. I think that the books are really cool. I have no clue why they're accessible to children, but the movie Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, I think they did a really great job, and I would definitely recommend that to anybody who is young adult, teenager to watch, especially just kind of getting into things. A random one that's on this list is Don't Look Under the Bed. This is a Disney movie as well, but it is so scary. So if you don't like jump scares, if you don't like that classic horror and are kind of intimidated by it, Don't Look Under the Bed out. It is still marketed to children, but it is so scary. It's, I can't believe it got made, honestly. So the other one that's kind of random that's on this list is The Goonies. The Goonies is not a horror movie whatsoever, but as a child, The Goonies scared the crap out of me. And so I always add it to the list of scary stories and movies from my childhood because it was always very freaky to me. So after teen horror movies, kid horror movies, I would recommend going into monster movies. So monster movies, a very simple example of a monster movie would be something like Frankenstein, or from a non-horror perspective would be Shrek. These are going to be where people are being bullied, where society is pushing people who look different out of the picture, cast aside type of thing. So these types of movies are going to be more for lesson learning, for learning morals. So again, if you are showing your children, if you are showing a younger sibling monster movies, you can't really go wrong there. So after monsters, I would recommend ghosts and hauntings. So paranormal has been something that I've always loved. I know there are a lot of people who are afraid of demons in particular, specifically if you have more of that religious background, but none of these movies that I'm about to mention, I have to check my list, none of them have any demonic influence. So these are all true haunting or ghost movies. And really the only difference there is a haunting is a haunted house. A ghost movie is just paranormal happenings going on. So no possessions here. But I would always recommend starting with either The Lovely Bones or The Others. Both of them are very serious. Both of them are very dark. They will stay with you, but they are not overtly scary. They're really beautiful, very sad, very somber, borderline dreadful movies, but they're satisfying. And they both have enough of a budget where you know that Hollywood was involved. So it's not like you're watching some found footage or something in like the back rooms. So The Others, Lovely Bones. Also on this list, I would recommend Mama. I know that Mama is not a very popular movie, but if you are just trying to test your threshold, I would give it a go. I feel the same sort of way for Lights Out and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark has Katie Holmes in it, and she's okay. That movie in particular, I think is really cool. I love the setting. I like how it's one of the very first to me that I saw in the movie theater that had more of this like creature feature element to it. So yeah, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, Lights Out, and Mama. All three of those I would definitely put in the same category of they're not great stories, but they will kind of test, like, do you still hide behind your fingers when you're watching the movie? How do you react? Also on this list is The Woman in Black. This is with Daniel Radcliffe, so you have a little bit of that familiarity. This to me has more of a mystery element rather than just overtly paranormal because you're trying to figure out what's going on with this house that he's staying in. You also have Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is a gothic romance. I'm hard pressed to even put it on this list because I don't find it to be scary, but it is Guillermo del Toro. So you have some horror and even just sort of like mystical vibes here. This is a little bit like Flowers in the Attic also without spoiling it. So Crimson Peak I wouldn't recommend also as a story or as a movie. It is just something to say, like, do you like more of that gothic romance? Because that'll start to show you that you might lean more vampire than anything else on this list. The other ones for ghosts and hauntings, you have Dead End. I think that Dead End is a really great slept-on classic. I think this is a perfect example of a movie that is simple, scary, to the point. Dead End is where you're crossing over into, this is a really great story. This is a solid movie. You also have Messengers. This is with Kristen Bell. This, to me, is not necessarily it's not really a great movie, but it is staining. To me, as a child, watching Messengers was one of the first that I was like, oh my God, this is way too scary. So also testing your limits. And then the last one that's on this list to test your limits is The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut also I think is kind of slept on. A lot of people don't like it because it's kind of cheesy, but it's scary and it's good. And you have some creepy elements in the background, you have some jump scares. This is where we get to a little bit more of a modern vibe. Also has the same vibe of the Amityville horror, because that is rooted in reality of a true horror story. I would say that the Amityville horror is not for everybody, but it is a classic horror movie, classic ghost story. So after Ghosts and Hauntings, now is when I would lean into more thriller and suspense. You've tested your tolerance on the unknown, on the paranormal. Do you like these characters? Can you connect with these characters? Is everything still a little bit too heady for you? If so, thrillers are where you're going to thrive. Thrillers and suspense movies, when done correctly, are the best stories that you're really going to find. So, one of the best in my opinion, thriller movie ever made is Shutter Island. Shutter Island is just absolutely phenomenal. This is starring Leonardo DiCaprio. There's a lot of big names in this movie, and rightfully so. I won't say much more about Shutter Island because if you have not seen it, I mean, skip everything before it and just go watch Shutter Island. It's phenomenal. Like, you can't not like Shutter Island. In that same vein, and also in Shutter Island, is Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is the first horror movie to get an Oscar. And so this is where we start to have more of the conversations of, is the storytelling in horror movies just as good, if not better, than some of these classic dramas, some of these classic rom-coms, anything like that? The Silence of the Lambs is a solid movie, solid story. I don't think I ever watched that start to finish until about a year ago. Like, it's just always been around and always been on, and I've always caught the same parts over and over again, but never really sat down to watch it start to finish. It's great. It's also my sister-in-law's favorite movie, so shout out to Karen if you're listening. The other ones that are on this list for thriller and suspense, you've Gone Girl. This came out a couple of years ago. It's very long, but if you can sit through it, it's definitely worth the payoff. It's a really great movie. One that I don't think is talked about enough either is a movie called The Raven. This came out not that long ago. This was the first R-rated movie that I saw in the movie theater, which is kind of funny. But The Raven, I think, did a really, really cool and great job of pulling from Edgar Allan Poe stories, and they use the character of Edgar Allan Poe to help them solve crimes of someone who is copying his stories. So you have that thriller and that suspense of who did it, where are they, what's going to happen next, mixed with the gothic storytelling of Edgar Allan Poe. So I think that that is a really great one, especially if you're going to go from paranormal or ghosts into thriller. That's a great crossover. After that, I have on this list Prisoners. I'm hard pressed to save Prisoners for later. Prisoners is really aggressive. It is just in terms of the storytelling. It's all these parents their children have been kidnapped. And so already it's a close to home type of thing. Like, this could happen to anyone. They make it so that these parents are just the people next door mentality. And the police officers are not really helping. No one in the neighborhood knows what happened. They're not super helpful. And so you have all of these parents who are now taking things into their own hands. And of course, when crimes are personal, that's a bad time to go do that. So Prisoners is aggressive. I would put Prisoners and The Lovely Bones in the same category of storytelling, but also just like, it's a little tough. The last on the list that kind of crosses over from thriller and suspense is The Roommate. So The Roommate came out a couple of years ago. Oh my God, probably, I don't even want to look it up. I've got to look it up. Oh my God. The Roommate came out in 2011, 15 years ago. That makes me sick to my stomach. So The Roommate is also another one that is very cheesy, but it is a very slow burn thriller and suspense movie. So The Roommate is one that I think is for anybody, especially if you're going off to college. This is going to be a great like college movie. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but in that slasher area, I don't have it on this list, but I would consider Happy Death Day more of a slasher movie. It's kind of a classic slasher movie, but The Roommate and Happy Death Day have the same vibe because you're at college, you're trying to figure out who the people are around you. Can you trust them? Do they have your best intentions? It's very much an analysis of the people who are in your life, but it's also what are people capable of in a supposed safe environment. So The Roommate does make the list, unfortunately, from 2011. Crazy. So after thriller and suspense, you have vampire and werewolf. I personally don't care about werewolves, so I really only have vampire movies on this list because I don't want to give you a bad recommendation for werewolves because I don't watch that. A classic one is American Werewolf in London. That is also a song, of course. So but I never watched it, so I can't say. But in terms of vampires, so my favorite vampire movie is Fright Night. Not the original, but the one from, God, at this point, I'm just guessing, probably 2010. But I really like Fright Night. I like horror movies that add in elements of humor, but that know what they're doing. Like, it's on purpose that it's supposed to be kind of funny. It's not cheesy funny. So Fright Night is great, you know, and I use my mom a lot of times as an example because she hates horror movies, but I still make her watch some of them. And so Fright Night is one that a couple years ago I made her watch, and she did enjoy it. So I do think Fright Night is kind of for anybody. And I wouldn't call it like a family movie night movie, but it deserves it. So other than Fright Night, you have The Lost Boys. This is a classic. This is from the late 80s, early 90s. This is going to be like the vampire movie to check out, especially if you're going to be more in that realm of classic, truly classic horror movies that you want to get started with. The Lost Boys is that one. I also have From Dusk Till Dawn on this list. That is one that also I've never watched start to finish. I've only ever seen bits and pieces of it, but the same sort of chunks over and over again. And to me, that's a really cool one that crosses over from vampires and werewolves into more of that like zombie apocalyptic vibe, which is what is next. But the other one to mention for vampires is Let the Right One In, which is the original version of Let Me In. These are like the vampire movies. Anybody who is a true vampire subgenre fan, you're gonna love these. This is as if a vampire was real in real time. There's not a whole lot of fluff. There's a lot of I wouldn't even call scares, but just they're scary. I mean, they're dark. They're dark movies. So I think they're really great. You got to go into it with more of that serious mindset. If you want more comedy, Fright Night it is. If you want more classic, The Lost Boys it is. If you want that bridge between vampires and zombies, From Dusk Till Dawn. So next up with the apocalyptic and zombies. I would probably start with A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place is not zombies. It's more of that sci-fi adjacent movie, but it's very good. And I think that the suspense that A Quiet Place has created, especially like when I went to go see it in the movies, and even the idea of like trying to quietly chew popcorn, for a movie to create that type of atmosphere and environment, you got to give credit where credit's due. Do I think they need to be still making them? Absolutely not. I think the most recent one that we had was very, very good, and I'm glad that they made it, but I don't think they need any more, and I don't really plan on going to watch any more of them, but it's something for everyone. Also a movie that my mom watched and didn't mind. But after A Quiet Place, I would probably say if you want more of that classic vibe, Dawn of the Dead is there. Night of the Living Dead. Those are both true classic zombie movies. This is where we get the rules for zombies as well. Like, you got to shoot them in the head. They got to walk slow. They got to walk fast. That came from Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead. Outside of that, we have Shaun of the Dead. It's one of the best. I mean, I will not accept if you don't like Shaun of the Dead. It's just a phenomenal movie. If humor is not your thing, if you're not a comedy person, you're not going to like Shaun of the Dead. If you like any semblance of self-aware, European even comedy, Shaun of the Dead is one of the best. You also have Zombieland. Zombieland to me is as if a horror comic book came to life. I really do enjoy Zombieland. I think the second one that they made was okay. I don't think they needed it, but Zombieland is great. After that, you have what I would consider to be a little bit more serious zombie movies. The fears of the end of the world are a lot louder in these. World War Z is one of them. And I don't want to stereotype, but World War Z it's a boy movie. It's an action movie. It is high stakes, high Hollywood, fast zombies. This is the fastest zombies that we've ever seen. And it's all action. So there's not a whole lot of horror outside of the actual storytelling of the zombies themselves, but there is a lot of action. Outside of World War Z, you then have the Crazies. I'm really, really hard pressed to say that the Crazies is my favorite zombie movie. It is not very well received. It's a little bit more on that cheesy side, but it does give me the same vibe of The Last of Us. And I'm a big fan of The Last of Us, the game and the TV show. I think that the Crazies kind of brought that to life and added a true horror element. The Crazies is a horror movie. I love it. The last one for apocalyptic and zombies, I would say, is Legion. Another one that's not really talked about a lot. Legion to me is very scary. When I went to go see The Lovely Bones in the movie theater, my brother and his wife, Karen, went to go see Legion. And so we snuck into the movie theater after The Lovely Bones and caught the very end of Legion. And it's scary. It's a scary movie. There is a grandmother who crawls on the ceiling, and the whole idea behind Legion is that this woman is going to be giving birth to the only redeemable human being that's left. And so the entire movie takes place in this diner in the middle of nowhere where she is the waitress and she's about to give birth. And so you have these waves of creatures and people that are coming to try to kill this woman so that her baby does not become born. So it feels very Call of Duty-esque in that you're repeating cycles over and over and over again of making sure that this woman is safe and defeating whatever creature is there at the time being. There's one creature in particular that like sneaks behind the front counter, and he says, "Don't be scared, I just want to play with the baby." And that has become a repeated quote in our entire family for years now. I mean, since we snuck into the movies to go see it. So I like Legion. I do. I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it to other people, but I mean, technically I am because I'm recommending it to all of you. So crossing over from apocalyptic and zombies, now I would recommend slasher. A lot of people, I think, make the mistake of trying to start with slasher because when you think of horror, that's a lot of times the very first thing you think about is a classic slasher movie. And then you watch it and you get scared, or you see blood and you get kind of grossed out, and then you never come back to horror. So don't do that. But slashers are your classic horror movies. This is where modern horror that we know of today really got its footing, its start. So I'm not going to run through all of the classics, but I would say some of the classics that are worthwhile, that are not too scary. Halloween is always the easiest one. To me, Halloween, please don't hate me. Please don't hate me for saying this. I am a much bigger Friday the 13th fan than I am a Halloween fan. I have never really understood the hype around Michael Myers. I find him and just the story itself kind of boring, but that's just me. That's just me. I like Friday the 13th. I think that it might be a little bit gory to some people, but if you can keep that summer camp slasher vibe in your mind, you're going to like it. Another one to mention is Chucky. Chucky is great. I think that Chucky adds the amount of comedy that you need for a little bit of a break through the movie. So I guess if I would rank them, I would say start with Halloween, go to Chucky, then maybe go to Scream. Scream, the comedy and the self-awareness in Scream absolutely carries it. I think Scream is one of the best, if not the best, classic horror movie. Then maybe Friday the 13th, and then Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street still does deserve a watch, definitely, but It's a lot gorier than you expect, especially for the time being. So don't underestimate it. We then have Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods, it's self-aware. It is very conspiracy theory adjacent. It's gameplay. It's not super serious, but the ending, I think the ending of Cabin in the Woods could use a little bit of work, which is why I don't necessarily consider it one of my favorites, but I still do think it's one of the best movies ever made. It's just fantastic and phenomenal. The other movies to mention for that more slasher genre, you have Fear Street. This came out just a couple of years ago on Netflix. This is based on the Goosebump books. And so now we're tying back in more of that like kid and teen movie. Even though Fear Street is very gory, is true slasher fashion, you have the solid good storytelling of something like Monster House. I don't want to say it's as good as Monster House, but there's 3 Fear Street movies. We just got the 4th one. The 4th one is not, don't watch it. You're going to ruin it. But the 3 that we have, I think are really great. And I think everybody who I've talked to that watched Fear Street really does like them. So they're innocent fun. They bring the gore, they bring the storytelling, and I think that they're solid. You also have Hellfest. Not a lot of people like Hellfest. If more of that cheesy nature is not for you, just skip it. I absolutely love Hellfest because I love Halloween haunted houses. You know, that's my big goal, is to have a Halloween haunted house. And so being able to see more of that like cheesy slasher in a haunted house, a traveling haunted house vibe. The music is by Bear McCreary, who did the music for The Walking Dead. So you also have one of the producers from The Walking Dead that does Hellfest as well. So a lot of people that I'm a fan of were involved in the making of Hellfest. So it just has a special place in my heart. It's not for everybody, but I want to add it to this list to show you it's not that serious of a movie that you can't handle. Like, I think I would recommend Hellfest to just about anybody. So after we get out of that slasher genre, and also notice that I did not include Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I would say don't go there yet. But after that classic slasher genre, now we move into psychological. I have used this as a trivia question before. What is the most popular subgenre of horror? Psychological is number 1. So psychological horror to me means you have to pay attention, you have to think. There are reasons why everyone in these movies is acting a certain type of way, is doing certain types of things, and it's not for no rhyme or reason. So I'm just going to go in order of how I've listed them. First off, I would say 13 Sins. 13 Sins is kind of aggressive. There is two scenes in particular. One where he is carrying a dead body to a restaurant, and another where all of these bikers end up getting slaughtered. So there is an element of death in these movies. I'll whisper that. But 13 Sins is a game. And so it's this guy who his whole life he has followed the rules, and even in the middle of the night, he's like still sitting at a red light. No one's around. Like, he could very easily justifiably run that light, but he's still following the rules. And so he gets a phone call, and this phone call says, hey, if you kill a fly in your car, I'll deposit $100 in your account. You've been selected as this 13 Sins winner. You have to do 13 tasks to win this grand prize. If you fail any of these tasks, you're out of the game. So, of course, he's like, yeah, if all I have to do is kill a fly and I get $100, why would I not play this game? So it gets progressively worse and worse, but that's where you start to see that line of psychological. What would you do in that situation? And this, to me, is also really where we start to have severe empathy for these characters. You can feel for him. You can understand and justify the actions of almost every single character, every single person in a psychological horror movie. And that is why we feel so connected to all of them. So after 13 Sins, we have Vivarium. Vivarium is going to pull on more of those suburbia fears and kind of like corporate fears in general. Then you have The Shining. The Shining is an absolute classic. I honestly would recommend The Shining to anybody even a little bit earlier, like just starting. I think it has more of that like suspense vibe than anything else, but there are a lot of people who find The Shining just terrifying. So for that reason, maybe just hold off on it for a little while. You also have Silent Hill. Silent Hill can double as a paranormal movie. I watched Silent Hill pretty early into my horror career, but Silent Hill is a little bit more fantastical. So you have these creatures, these characters that are completely made up and also off the wall. But it has a pretty cool story. And it's what lengths will you go to save your loved ones, to save yourself? What choices will you make? What do you understand about the environment that's around you? What's real? What's not? So Silent Hill deserves to be in the psychological slot. You also have Would You Rather. Would You Rather and 13 Sins to me are in the exact same genre, exact same category, one of the best. Would You Rather is definitely a top 10 horror movie for me. I think it's fantastic. It's starring Brittany Snow, and it's just she and her brother. And they don't really have a lot of money. So she gets the opportunity to attend this dinner where all you have to do is play a game of Would You Rather, and whoever is the last person standing wins whatever they want. Money, riches, fame, notoriety, whatever you want to call it. So, of course, she's responsible and she's like, yeah, I have to. We need money. We need to do something. So, I will not say any more than that. It's just a gameplay version. There is also a movie that I didn't write on this list, but I would put it adjacent, is a movie called Cadaver. That was on Netflix. I believe it is a Netflix movie, but Cadaver, Would You Rather, 13 Sins, they all have the same vibe. It's what will you do for a prize? What kind of game will you play? This is also why I think Squid Game became as popular as it did, because you have the psychological elements. So you're trying to figure out what would you do in that situation? Who would you be? What would you embody? Who would you screw over? Who would you help? So there's a lot of self-reflection with psychological movies. You also have Get Out and all of the other Jordan Peele movies. They definitely fall under psychological. Some people will call them exploitative horror movies, but it's just because they're kind of political. They are still very much what do you think? And that's the whole point of Jordan Peele's movies, is making you think, making you pay attention. If you watch all of Jordan Peele's movies, there are all these Easter eggs and secrets in the background. They are there on purpose. So, and that's another thing to point out, is if you are somebody who ends up watching horror movies sort of like between your fingers, you're missing out on so much stuff in the background. You got to pay attention to everything that's on the set. It all builds to the story, and it gives you secrets that literally no other genre will do. So outside of Jordan Peele, I would be hard pressed to not put Saw in this category. I know a lot of people don't like Saw. I love Saw. It's my favorite horror franchise. And you can wait on Saw if you are someone who really can't handle gore. But if you are in the mood to pay attention to rules, pay attention to stories, pay attention to consequences, this is your time to explore Saw. I would probably recommend watching them in order to start, but my specific favorite is Saw 6. It has more of that corporate vibe. It's you have all of these expectations and rules that other people have to follow. What happens when someone makes you follow them? So I like that, of course. Outside of Saw, the other two that are on this psychological list are more new movies. So we have Marrowbone and we have Night House. I have a bet with my friend on which one is going to get higher praise in the Shivers Discord, Marrowbone or Night House. Currently, he is winning with Marrowbone, but I love the Night House. I would put Night House as my top 3 all-time favorite horror movies and movies in general. Marrowbone absolutely deserves all the credit that it gets. Both of them are very gothic family love stories. That's what they are. But they're not for everyone if you don't listen and you don't let them linger. They're both very purpose-driven. They're both incredible rewatches and hindsight written, but they're pretty heavy in terms of you kind of feel like you have to have a drink after them, but they're great. So they're not going to overtly scare you, but they're going to stick with you. So after we have the psychological subgenre, now we have possession. Possession movies are different from ghosts because now we are taking usually innocent archetypes and completely immersing them in evil or immersing them in things that are really scary. So this is what I was saying before of a lot of times people get really freaked out with ghost stories because they think they're demons. Usually they're not. I would say maybe 75% of the time they're not, but possession movies almost 75% of the time they are. So this is where we're really cranking it up. So the first one that I would recommend is one that I watched when I was a teenager. This is The Haunting of Molly Hartley. This is a very, very cheesy version of The Autopsy of Jane Doe. You have this slow build of paranormal and things that are going on and a little bit of lore. The shadow figures out of the corner of your eye. Even that, like, there's a classic horror movie called White Noise. They feel very similar. It's almost the same as, like, God, I can't even say it, but it's almost the same as the feeling of The Sixth Sense without being as good as The Sixth Sense. And so let me also throw The Sixth Sense back to that thriller and suspense genre. Sixth Sense is phenomenal. So outside of The Haunting of Molly Hartley, you have The Taking of Deborah Morgan. This has become more popular in like internet lore and terms. It's not necessarily a great movie, but it is scary. So this is going to be one that's going to start to test your element of scare. You then have Deliver Us from Evil. This is based on a true story of a police officer. I think Deliver Us from Evil is really great. I rewatched it maybe a year ago, and it's not as great as I remembered it to be, but it's still really good. And it's freaky. It's not scary, it's freaky. You have the classic, The Exorcist. There are many people who will still say this is the scariest movie ever made. I certainly don't think so, but you gotta give credit where credit's due, and this is what put possession movies on the map in the first place. So it's at least worth checking out. You then have The Possession. This is scary. The Possession is a scary movie. This is the first one where I went to the movies and it was like, wow, I am watching a scary movie. That was probably one of the first, like, I can handle this type of movie. So it's good. It's scary. It is in the same genre and vibe, I would say, of like Insidious. Like you're gonna have your jump scares. You're gonna get scared. The Possession is that for sure. And then the last possession movie that I would mention is Jennifer's Body. I really love Jennifer's Body. I have kind of a soft spot for it. I think it's a phenomenal conversation around female empowerment. And as we were talking about with the Monster House of sort of subverting expectations, this is a movie that makes you talk about that. So any movie that gets you having a conversation, I think has done its job. And it's also created and directed by Diablo Cody. Diablo Cody is a very strong influence on female empowerment, specifically in the horror industry. And she has also created Lisa Frankenstein. That's the most recent creation of hers. So you get the vibe of that, like, fun teenager, what happens when we're teenagers, what happens if we lean into our stereotype or break our stereotype. It's cool. They're great conversations. So now we're possessed. Now it's time to be tortured. I'm so sorry to tell you. My biggest piece of advice is knowing that if a movie can use corn syrup and red food dye to create such a visceral reaction in the viewer, you have to give them credit. You don't have to like it. You don't have to cheer for it. You don't have to go out of your way to watch it. But it's like magic. It's a magic trick. You are being tricked into feeling a certain type of way for characters that don't exist in a story that is not real with effects that you can buy from the grocery store. You have to give credit where credit is due. So again, if you're somebody who's just like, I don't like gore, I don't like blood, I don't even want to see a drop of blood, then just skip this and go right to Dread. But I think you're missing out on a lot of really great storytelling because you're just too focused on what's going on the screen. A perfect example of that is Saw, but you also have Hostel. Hostel is it's all about a conversation about Americans and tourism and how ignorant people can be. You also have Audition. Audition is one also kind of about women empowerment, but more about you don't know what people have going on behind the scenes. Another one to mention is Fresh. This is a newer movie on Hulu, and it really does focus on the dating scene and the fears of dating, the fears of letting someone in, the fear of being vulnerable, anything like that. Another one to mention is I Spit on Your Grave. This is part of the Video Nasties from back in the day. So the Video Nasties was a collection of horror movies that were deemed as too aggressive for the public. So they were banned in certain movie theaters or banned in certain countries. And it got to the point where certain creators were hoping to be put on the Video Nasties because of reputation. Like, wow, my movie is so scary and so objectively offensive that it's going to be put on this list, basically. So I Spit on Your Grave, the original one, Cannibal Holocaust, the original one, both are on the Video Nasties. But I Spit on Your Grave is still one that's going to be, it's really aggressive. That will test your tolerance. The last one, I don't like it. I will be very vocal that I don't like this movie. It is Terrifier. This to me is why people don't like gory movies. This is why people don't like torture movies. There's not enough of a good story in the background to make up for all of the effects that you have. So yes, I'm being impacted by your corn syrup and your red food dye, but I have nothing to connect to. I am not connecting to the lore. I am not connecting to the story. If Terrifier had a stronger background storytelling for Art the Clown, explained the rules, explained how he sort of cocoons, why he comes out now not only on Halloween, but also on fucking Christmas, like, you're not following a pattern. You're not following a story. So I really hate it. I've done a lot of horror movie reviews, as you know and see, and the only one that I got a lot of hate for was Terrifier, because I said I don't like it. It's not a good story. So use your own judgment. If you want to watch Terrifier, it's literally just a temperature check. Do you handle this spicy food very well? And I said I don't like it. It tastes like acid. So after torture, now you have dread. Dread is where I would say I am at the moment. I never really liked dreadful movies because I want a story. I want a beginning, middle, and end. I want to feel satisfied. I want to feel like I ate a good meal. And now we move on from there. Dread leaves you feeling overfilled and sick to your stomach. That's if you're going to compare it to food. I think that really 3 staples of dread are The Lodge, Hereditary, and The Menu. You can already kind of feel the vibe of what they have in common. It's all about movies that have really dark storytelling, really characters that have a very dark, depressing past, and now there's an element of karma. So they're not necessarily satisfying. Almost all dread-filled movies have really negative endings. So that's a part of the way that you'll know that you're watching a dreadful movie is because it's not satisfying. It's not a satisfying ending, but they're going to be good. So the last subgenre on this list is body horror. This is different than torture because you are actually changing the people's bodies that are in there. So it's not just about possession of being taken over. It's possession plus something else, or it's a drug that turns you into something else. A perfect example of that is The Fly. The Fly is from back in the late 80s, early 90s. Jeff Goldblum is more of like a scientist, I believe, and he's trying to turn somebody else into a fly. And so he turns himself into a fly. And you have some really great effects. And if you are someone who likes the makeup and likes the effects and likes the artistry of it, then body horror is absolutely going to be for you because there's so much to look at. It's so impressive, but it's just a lot. You also have Eraserhead. This is probably one of the first, and it doesn't, to me, Eraserhead does not have a strong enough story to carry through with the body horror, but you also have The Substance. So The Substance came out just a couple of years ago. This is really where we're starting to see body horror going. This takes a much more modern approach of Ozempic and buccal fat removal and Botox and anything else, and just says, when is enough enough? So I love the conversation that the substance has brought up. I don't love the substance as a movie. I wish I did. I really do. It, to me, one of the worst, if not the worst horror movie I ever watched is a movie called Neon Demon. And I love like the fashion industry. I think it's really cool. I love the idea of fashion shows. I like watching old fashion shows. I think they're really cool. But Neon Demon is all about the fashion industry and has the same sort of conversation as The Substance. It's just very poorly done. And The Substance has a great story, but it feels like it's already done. And then their effects are not consistent enough. Like Demi Moore turns into this creature, basically, this grotesque version of herself, and she's like crawling in the bathroom. But then the beautiful version of herself starts running away, and she gets up and starts running. Like, you were crawling on the bathroom because you were in so much pain, but now all of a sudden you can run. Like, it doesn't add up. I'm a real big stickler for consistency. So we have that there. And the very last movie that I will recommend, I would say it falls under possession, it falls under slasher, it falls under psychological, and it falls under body horror, are any of the Evil Dead movies. To me, Evil Dead from 2013 was the very first movie that I said, I am a horror fan. After watching this movie, I am a horror fan. And even still, when I go back and watch it, I would compare Evil Dead from 2013 to Cabin in the Woods, but just a cranked up, dialed up version of it. But I think that the comedy of the classic Evil Deads mixed with the grotesque nature of demons and the chainsaw being just smushed into your hand, you have a little bit of everything. And so if you don't know what you like, but you've tested your tolerance and you say, I can handle it, Evil Dead's going to give you a little bit of everything. Even Evil Dead Rise, even this most recent Lee Cronin's The Mummy, they all feel the same. Like, I'm getting a little bit from all of these subgenres, while I also still feel kind of grossed out, but mostly scared. And that's what you want. That's what you want. So let me know what some of your favorite horror movies are. Again, this is a very general list for some of these subgenres, but I would recommend watching them in order. See where you get kind of triggered. Where do I feel mostly scared? Where do I feel not scared? What in between is going to be impacting me? And find your sweet spot. Maybe you don't like all the way up to Carolina Reaper, but you end up liking medium. You like habanero, who knows? So just give it a try. Open your mind. Be open-minded. They are just movies. They cannot hurt you. They will not come in the middle of the night and slash you. Like, you're going to be fine. So yeah, let me know what some of your favorites are. Where did you start? If you are a horror fan, where are you now? I always like seeing the patterns. So thanks as always for listening, and I hope you enjoy.